the heartbreaking story of a lonely woman abandoned by her unfaithful husband. Until one day, the woman, who never believed in love, meets a charismatic young man who turns out to be a new employee at her office and ends up stealing her heart.
사랑해요.
This beautiful girl is named So-yoon, the daughter of a prominent politician whose life is full of pressure and always in the public eye, to the point that she couldn't choose her own path in life. When she graduated from college, So-yoon agreed to marry the son of an official to smooth her father's political career. Unfortunately, So-yoon got divorced after her husband cheated. She then chose to stay single and focused on managing the hotel business gifted by her former in-laws, eventually turning it into one of the best hotels in Korea. Due to the many rules she had to follow and the need to maintain her image in front of the media, So-yoon appeared cold and never smiled. But her dull life suddenly turned vibrant after So-yoon met Kim Jin-hyuk, an ordinary young man who was always cheerful and younger than her. One day, during a business trip to Cuba, the car So-yoon was riding in almost hit Jin-hyuk. Although Jin-hyuk wasn't injured, unfortunately, his camera was damaged from the fall. Manager So-yoon had offered compensation, but Jin-hyuk politely declined, so So-yoon continued on her way to the hotel. Before leaving, her manager left a business card for Jin-hyuk.
이번으로 제가 연락드리겠습니다.
Once she arrived in her room, So-yoon took a sleeping pill because she wanted to rest. But she changed her mind after seeing a picture of the beautiful sunset on Havana's beach. She then boldly decided to go to the place on her own, even though she didn't know the way. Unfortunately, before she could reach the beach, So-yoon was pickpocketed, and in the end, she had to walk because she didn't have a single cent left to pay for a taxi. When she arrived at the beach, So-yoon sat on the railing of a fairly tall structure. The sleeping pills she had taken earlier started to take effect, and she nearly fell onto the street. Luckily, Jin-hyuk, who happened to see her, quickly caught So-yoon with his arms. So-yoon ended up sleeping on Jin-hyuk's shoulder for an hour. When she woke up, So-yoon was shocked to see the makeup artist sitting next to her. But after Jin-hyuk explained what had happened, So-yoon felt more at ease because it turned out Jin-hyuk was Korean and didn't seem like a bad person.
그쪽 발에서 저 아래로 떨어졌어요.
Jin-hyuk then invited So-yoon to enjoy the beauty of Cuba at night. They went out to eat together and even danced at a salsa club. Seeing So-yoon's feet blistered from high heels, Jin-hyuk took the initiative to buy her new comfortable sandals. So-yoon feels happy walking with Jin-hyuk, but she has to return to the hotel because her manager must be worried.
아닙니다. 타국에서 빛을 발한
Before parting ways, Jin-hyuk invited So-yoon to have breakfast together the next morning. However, So-yoon couldn't promise she would be able to come due to work commitments. Even so, she was very grateful because that day Jin-hyuk had helped her a lot during a difficult time and even took her out to have fun. After So-yoon left, Jin-hyuk suddenly realized that she had left her shoes at Ranzal. He then kept the shoes so he could return them the next time they met. The next day, Jin-hyuk waited for So-yoon at the place they had agreed on. But after waiting for several hours, So-yoon still hadn't shown up. Jin-hyuk then left a small note on the restaurant board, just in case So-yoon came after he had left. At the airport, the two of them happened to run into each other. So-yoon apologized for not being able to keep her promise. She also offered to compensate for Jin-hyuk's broken camera. However, Jin-hyuk kindly refused it. He also told So-yoon to change her airplane seat to business class, but So-yoon refused.
아니에요. 전 제 좌석에서 갈게요.
After arriving in Korea, Jin-hyuk couldn't stop thinking about So-yoon and looked again at the business card her manager had given him. That's when Jin-hyuk realized that So-yoon was actually the president of a well-known hotel, so famous that her name always came up in internet searches. At the same time, Jin-hyuk received news that he was accepted to work at the Donghwa Hotel. Instead of feeling happy, Jin-hyuk was completely shocked because he would be working under So-yoon, the woman he had spent a romantic night with in Cuba.
예.
Jin-hyuk's return to Korea was warmly welcomed by his parents. Even though he was raised in a modest family, Jin-hyuk grew up to be a kind and cheerful young man.
아이고, 이거 밥이야?
Jin-hyuk's father, who works as a fruit vendor, felt proud when he heard that his son had been accepted to work at Donghua Hotel. His mother was also overjoyed and even told the neighbors about Jin-hyuk's success. That night, Jin-hyuk met up with his two best friends, Dachan and Hyeon, to tell them that he was no longer unemployed.
형 가게 바쁘다고 나 그만 불러.
예, 알겠습니다.
After gathering, Jin-hyuk sat in the park with Hyeon and asked about So-yoon because he was curious. According to Hyeon, at the Donghua Hotel for 1 year, So-yoon is known as the president who never smiles. However, all the employees understood because So-yeon's life was full of pressure and constantly under public scrutiny. Even so, So-yoon was known as a hard worker who deeply valued her employees. The next day, when So-yoon was giving a welcome speech to the new employees, she was completely shocked to see Jin-hyuk sitting right in front of her. The meeting made So-yoon keep thinking about Jin-hyuk. She secretly read his resume out of interest. When she saw Jin-hyuk talking on the phone, So-yoon felt jealous as love began to grow in her heart.
누구랑 통화하면 저런 표정이 나오는 걸까요?
In the evening, after work, So-yoon went to the park, remembered what Jin-hyuk had written in the resume. Accidentally, Jin-hyuk saw and immediately approached the woman to express his concerns about their second meeting in Cuba. Jin-hyuk felt relieved after hearing that So-yoon had known from the beginning that Jin-hyuk genuinely intended to help her, without any intention of wooing her to get a job at the hotel.
그런 걱정이라면 내려둬요.
After their conversation in the park, Jin-hyuk invites So-yoon to see his photos from Cuba, playing the claw machine. Their time together made So-yoon feel happy, and she found herself thinking about Jin-hyuk more and more. The next day, her mother asked her to come over and told her to reconcile with Woo-suk. So-yoon felt sad. How could she not? Since her father became a politician, So-yoon must live by strict rules, even ignoring her own feelings and meeting her parents' demands. Meanwhile, after drinking with his teammates, Jin-hyuk got heavily drunk and was staggering along the side of the road. So-yoon accidentally saw it and felt sorry, so she immediately approached to take him home. Throughout the trip, Jin-hyuk acted silly, making So-yoon laugh nonstop. Jin-hyuk's drunken antics made him regret it the next day, especially when he was called in to meet So-yoon in her office. Jin-hyuk thought he would be fired because of his rude behavior last night. Apparently, So-yoon invited him to eat ramyeon over the weekend.
얼마니 너는 대박. 차도 한번 운전해 볼래요?
Jin-hyuk felt both relieved and happy because he also wanted to spend time with So-yoon like they did back at the Dome. On a bright Sunday morning, So-yoon picked up Jin-hyuk and took him to a rest area to eat ramyeon. Before parting ways, Jin-hyuk had given So-yoon his phone number so that So-yoon could easily call him when she felt lonely. Jin-hyuk's warm demeanor made So-yoon fall for him even more. But their happiness didn't last long, because the next day, photos of So-yoon with Jin-hyuk spread across the internet, accompanied by an article stating that So-yoon is secretly dating a man younger than her. Both So-yoon and Jin-hyuk were equally surprised and unprepared for their photo going viral. Eventually, it led to So-yeon's name topping internet search rankings, because Jin-hyuk's face was blurred in the photo. After So-yeon's dating news spread on the internet, her former mother-in-laws named Yeon Kim met her and told So-yoon to fire Jin-hyuk. If So-yoon refused, the Taekyeon group would take back the Donghua Hotel, as stated in the agreement So-yoon signed before divorcing Woo-suk. 3 years ago, when So-yoon asked for a divorce, it turned out that Yeon divided the family assets, which included a nearly bankrupt hotel, with the condition that So-yoon must continue to attend all Taekyeon group events and maintain her good image in front of the media. Yeon used the scandal with Jin-hyuk as a reason to make So-yoon step down from her position and reconcile with Woo-suk. He even paid journalists to, in fact, publish articles calling Jin-hyuk a stalker. Of course, So-yoon was both heartbroken and worried about Jin-hyuk, who was now entangled in trouble with her family.
다들 너무하네.
So-yoon then met with Woo-suk and asked him to persuade his mother to stop bothering hardworking employees like Jin-hyuk. In addition, So-yoon urged Woo-suk to quickly marry his former mistress so that his mother would no longer force them to reconcile. As if it wasn't enough to create scandalous news and articles, he also sabotaged the painting to display at the new hotel branch in Dara, Soko. So-yoon immediately, without delay, went to that place to resolve the issue, while also taking some time alone to avoid the various conflicts caused by Mrs. Kim.
Oh, take me on.
So-yoon and Jin-hyuk's scandal worried Ayan about Jin-hyuk. Even though Jin-hyuk's face was blurred in the article photo, Ayan still recognized him by the clothes he often wore. Ayan, who had long harbored feelings for Jin-hyuk, pretended to be strong and comforted him at the playground. Jin-hyuk also appreciates Ayan's efforts, trusted long. One night, while Jin-hyuk was relaxing with his family, the news about So-yoon's scandal suddenly appeared on television. Jin-hyuk's younger sibling grew suspicious upon seeing the photo of the man with So-yoon, who looked very much like Jin-hyuk, even though his face was blurred. Fortunately, the father interrupted his sibling's speech and doubted that his son could be that close to a hotel president.
닮은 거 같지 않아?
그러네.
Meanwhile, So-yoon's personal driver, Tuan Nam, picked up Jin-hyuk and took him to the bar to cheer up So-yoon. Tuan Nam is not just a driver, he is also a friend of So-yoon's father who has treated him as his own son. That's why Tuan Nam was worried about So-yoon's mental state, as she was constantly troubled by problems. Upon arriving at Soko, Jin-hyuk invited So-yoon to spend time together at the beach. His presence made So-yoon's anxious heart become joyful, and So-yoon even kept smiling when she was with the man. So-yoon also apologized for dragging Jin-hyuk into her problems. However, Jin-hyuk said that he doesn't feel bothered by all the news about them. Jin-hyuk is actually more worried about So-yoon because her name is more popular than top celebrities.
전 아무렇지도 않습니다. 걱정하지 마세요.
After returning home, Jin-hyuk, who was asleep, suddenly woke up when he heard a romantic song he had once listened to with So-yoon. The longing in his heart made Jin-hyuk immediately go to Daekan to borrow a car and head straight to Soko that very same day. Upon arriving, Jin-hyuk asked So-yoon to breakfast.
근처에 진짜 맛있는 해장국집이 있는데 어제 못 가봐서요.
At first, So-yoon was confused by Jin-hyuk's behavior in coming to see her. After all, they had just seen each other the night before. But Jin-hyuk immediately expressed how much he missed So-yoon when he heard a song they used to listen to together. Her confessed his feelings to So-yoon, even though he knew that their social statuses were very different. Jin-hyuk's words made So-yoon fall silent. On one hand, she felt the same way about Jin-hyuk, but on the other hand, she didn't want to ruin his future by letting him get involved in problems with the Taekyeon group.
우리라는 표현은 좀
보고 싶어서 왔어요.
So-yoon chose to hide her happiness when Jin-hyuk reminisced in Cuba to avoid Jin-hyuk getting too involved in her life. But Jin-hyuk didn't give up that easily. He still wanted to be with So-yoon and even invited her to have coffee while sitting and watching the sea. Due to exhaustion, after driving all night, Jin-hyuk accidentally fell asleep under So-yoon. Seeing Jin-hyuk lying there, So-yoon tells how her childhood was marked by her mother forbidding her from making friends. She was even once forced to stay away from a friend she really liked, which left her traumatized and afraid to make friends again. That's why So-yoon wants Jin-hyuk to stay away from her as she's worried their relationship will eventually hurt her. Secretly, Jin-hyuk listens to all of So-yoon's stories since it turns out he was just pretending to be asleep. Meanwhile, Woo-suk went to Soko to deliver a birthday gift for So-yoon. Woo-suk still harbors feelings for his ex-wife and mentions it as he can't stand seeing So-yoon live under pressure while living in same house with cruel Mrs. Kim. As he was about to leave, Woo-suk accidentally saw Jin-hyuk and So-yeon returning from breakfast.
이거 대표님 드리려고 오다가 샀어요.
Even though he felt jealous, Woo-suk tried to hold himself back so as not to add to So-yeon's worries. That day, he secretly followed So-yoon as she tried to persuade Master Jang to display her painting in the hotel. Because he was uneasy seeing So-yoon struggling from her mother's actions, Woo-suk went to see Master Jang and persuaded him willing to give his painting to So-yoon. Thanks to Woo-suk's efforts, the painting issue was resolved. But instead of being happy, So-yoon felt burdened and ended up returning the painting because she didn't want to accept help from Woo-suk. She even asked her manager, who was truly upset, to return the gift that Woo-suk had sent. Woo-suk couldn't stand Mrs. Kim's attitude and eventually threatened to leave the house if his mother kept bothering So-yoon. Meanwhile, Mrs. Kim continues to try to make So-yoon step down from her position as president. She instructed her assistant to approach Ai-in, who was known to be Jin-hyuk's close friend. Ai-in received an offer for a promotion if she was willing to write a post about So-yoon and Jin-hyuk's relationship in the company article anonymously. However, Ai-in refused, even though she felt jealous when she saw Jin-hyuk getting closer to So-yoon. One night, while coming home from work, So-yoon accidentally hit a car in front of Jin-hyuk, waiting for the bus. Jin-hyuk saw it, resolved the issue with the victim, and insisted on taking So-yoon home.
나중에 혼날게요. 오늘은 내가 하자는 대로 해요.
Upon arrival, Jin-hyuk gave a gift to So-yoon. At first, So-yoon refused the gift and said that it would be best if the two of them never saw each other again. But as Jin-hyuk got out of the car, So-yoon changed her mind and asked for the gift back. So-yoon really couldn't contain her happiness when receiving attention from Jin-hyuk. That also made Jin-hyuk feel worried and warned him to stay away from Jin-hyuk before they got involved in more complicated problems.
그만해야 돼, 수연아.
Ni-jin even asked Jin-hyuk to meet the next day at a shop owned by Daegan. He told Jin-hyuk to stay away from So-yoon because ever since meeting her, So-yoon has always been involved in many problems. However, Jin-hyuk refused and convinced Ni-jin that his love for So-yoon was genuine. The next day, trouble struck So-yoon again. Someone wrote a post in the office article slandering So-yoon for allegedly forcing her younger male employees to date her. Jin-hyuk is uneasy because malicious comments about So-yoon keep appearing. Moreover, all the office employees continue to gossip about her with unreasonable accusations. At first, So-yoon chose to ignore the post and acted coldly as she usually did. As they were leaving the office, Director Choi came and cornered him publicly.
회사에 계셨었네요. 뵙고 상의 드리고 싶어서 연락을 했.
Seeing that So-yoon was feeling pressured, Jin-hyuk finally decided to step forward. He openly invited So-yoon to have dinner together in front of everyone to prove that their relationship was not forced and truly and genuinely sincere. So-yoon was touched by Jin-hyuk's brave and romantic gesture. Her eyes teared up, her lips kept smiling when she saw the sincerity in Jin-hyuk's eyes. Eventually, So-yoon agreed to Jin-hyuk's dinner invitation. In the middle of the journey, So-yoon planned she and Jin-hyuk would just go to pray. He then brought down Jin-hyuk and Mr. Nam, though Jin-hyuk was upset. Jin-hyuk then invited So-yoon to a unique cafe owned by his father's acquaintance. The two of them seemed to get along well, and then So-yoon invited him to have some tea. The cafe owner then left the two of them and gave them a little space to talk. He even thought that the woman Jin-hyuk brought was his girlfriend.
나한테 소개시켜주려고 온 거 아니야?
So-yoon said not to act brave with So-carry, or it will be hard. But Jin-hyuk interrupted and said that he had decided to be more courageous. He also wanted to become someone more meaningful to So-yoon. On the way home, the two of them talked about So-carry at the office. Jin-hyuk said they must seem familiar with each other to not seem strange. He then continued his journey by train. When about to go home, Jean, let's stop by Daijin's shop to meet Mi-jin. At that time, Mi-jin thanked Jin-hyuk for his efforts and admired his courage. However, he still told Jin-hyuk to avoid So-yoon. Jin-hyuk said that he and So-yoon are now actually closer. Hearing that made Mi-jin feel a little dizzy, and she decided to drink soju. There she tells about So-yeon's life, which is complicated.
엄청 부잔데 연애도 한번 못 해보고.
The next day at Donggwa Hotel, rumors about Jin-hyuk and So-yoon continued to spread. However, Jean tries to stay cheerful and unaffected. Considering that many people were talking about it in the cafeteria, Jin-hyuk decided to go to the cafe near the office. While waiting for his order, he received a message from So-yoon, who happened to see him by chance as she was passing by.
점심 걸어라.
So-yoon asked about the radio app that Jin-hyuk mentioned before. Jin-hyuk replied to the message and said that, honestly, he just wanted to run away. But he didn't have the courage to do it alone. Jean bravely invites So-yoon to take a little half-day off and visit an art gallery. So-yoon agreed, asking Jin-hyuk to return to the office to request a Jean. But it seems like Justice Secretary has found out where Jin-hyuk is going.
그래요. 오늘 급한 일 없으니까 일찍 들어셔요.
It turned out the place wasn't actually an art gallery, but rather a street where every corner was filled with paintings. However, Jin-hyuk still referred to it as an art gallery. The two of them strolled around while enjoying the artwork displayed there. Jean invites So-yoon to eat at a shop that he thinks is very delicious. At the same time, Yin also comes to the shop. However, when she saw Jin-hyuk and So-yoon happy together, she decided against it. The girl walked sadly past a convenience store that reminded her of the moments she shared with Jin-UK. Currently, he also feels he has lost a true friend. While on the way, So-yeon's mother, Mrs. Jean, kept calling her with a slightly irritated tone. Because earlier, So-yoon had lied about her business trip to Busan. After dropping off Mejin and planning to go home, So-yoon saw her mother was waiting. She canceled her plan to go home to avoid an argument with her mother. So-yoon decided to look at the painting she had previously observed with Jin-hyuk. She didn't expect Jin-hyuk to also come to that place, as if he had a feeling that So-yoon was there. While looking at the painting, suddenly Jin-hyuk asked, "What if this meeting is considered as two people who both have feelings of affection?" So-yeon was initially awkward and just remained silent, but when Jin-hyuk continued to gaze into her eyes with hope, So-yeon finally began to open her heart and intended to get to know each other. Afterward, Jin invites So-yoon to go cycling together. They also bought a cake to celebrate the day their relationship became more than just friends.
오늘 기념일이잖아요. 썸남썸녀 1일 기념.
Inside the cake, there were accessories that they both kept as mementos. Upon arriving home, they both appeared very happy as they reminisced about the anniversary moment in their respective homes. So-yoon was visited by her mother. The woman also reminded So-yoon not to create an embarrassing scandal because she had been expelled from the family. Madame Jean asked So-yoon to uphold her dignity as her daughter. So-yoon is currently at the tailor's to pick up an item. However, as she is about to leave, she sees a tie that looks nice and immediately thinks of Jin-hyuk. So-yoon decided to buy one of them. While waiting for her order, So-yoon heard a voice that sounded like Woo-suk, talking about a way to win a woman's heart.
여자한테 잘 보여야 할 텐데 괜찮았나요?
Realizing that her ex-husband was following her, So-yoon immediately went while picking up the tie he ordered. Arriving home, So-yoon eyed the tie she was going to give to Jin-hyuk. She then decided to go to Madame Lee's cafe, convinced that Jin-hyuk would be there. Jin-hyuk, leaving the house, was surprised to see So-yeon's car nearby. He knocked on the car glass window.
어머,
Jin-hyuk offered So-yoon to briefly stop by Mrs. Lee's cafe. But So-yoon refused and instead invited him to go for a walk. That's when they talked about So-yoon's struggles establishing the Donghwa Hotel. Upon arriving at the car, So-yoon gave the tie to Jin-hyuk, explaining that it was a bonus when she bought a gift for her father.
아빠 선물 사니까 사은품으로 줬어요.
At home, So-yoon, who had met her father earlier that day, recalled Mr. Sie's words, where he expressed that he didn't want his son to be gossiped about, and if this was just a temporary relationship, then So-yoon should end it. On the other hand, Director Choi said it was only to embarrass So-yoon in front of VIP guests and shareholders at an event that will be held in a few days. He deliberately sent some questions to the journalists who would come to cover the event and seemed indifferent to the reputation of So-yoon's parents. The grand opening of the Donghwa Resort Hotel was finally held. Jin-hyuk was seen checking the room that would be used by the guests. He ran into So-yoon, and she asked him about the tie she had given him the day before. So-yoon put it on, which was seen by Woo-suk from a rather considerable distance. After the inauguration, Mrs. Jean was seen meeting with Chairman Sie. The two are at odds over the party chairman who chose his own path because their visions now differ. It reached a point when Mrs. Jean started mentioning So-yoon as if she was going to reconcile with her son. After that conversation, he was in the lobby and saw Jin-hyuk, deciding to talk to him, slightly. He spoke as if mocking Jin-hyuk, who had seduced a wealthy woman, but Jin-hyuk did not respond. A speech was given by So-yoon and everything went smoothly until one of the journalists asked about the scandal that had been circulating. Initially, So-yoon refused to answer. However, one journalist said that if Jin-hyuk was suspected of being So-yoon's stalker, he was speculated. So-yoon thought and decided to answer in front of everyone that her relationship with Jin-hyuk is more than just friends.
썸 타는 사이입니다.
Everyone was shocked by So-yoon's confession. Her mother scolded her and thought she was crazy. He told So-yoon to apologize to him for that confession. However, So-yoon refused. She said she would live by her own choices. Upon arriving in So-yoon's room, she decided to call and invite Jin-hyuk to meet. Everyone seemed to leave to give Jin-hyuk and So-yoon space to talk. So-yoon was worried about Jin-hyuk, who wasn't used to crowds, and likewise, Jin-hyuk was concerned about So-yoon's condition.
뭐라고 말해야 할지 모르겠어요.
뭘 고민해요?
So, let's send a message to Jin and invite him to dinner together. Jin-hyuk awaited So-yoon's arrival, and he was approached by Woo-suk and his secretary. The man just greeted and confirmed the incident between Jin-hyuk and So-yoon that happened on Soko Island. Jin indeed confirmed that and asked why Woo-suk was making sure of it with him. Woo-suk reminds Jin-hyuk that he only wants to protect So-yoon.
오빠 마음.
While Jin-hyuk was having dinner with So-yoon, he said that he would decide to take their relationship beyond just friends. So those who heard it were surprised, but it turned out that what Jin-hyuk meant was that the two of them are now officially dating. Jin-hyuk and So-yoon began planning the places and activities they would do together. While joking, then a message came into So-yoon's phone with the meeting schedule for the next day. Next day, the board meeting was held. So-yoon promised and apologized for the personal matter she posted publicly yesterday. Director Choi responded to So-yoon's apology, but for him, an apology is not enough because So-yoon must face sanctions. He said that this was the right time for So-hyun to step down as a prestier. Hearing that, So-yoon just made sure that the incident would never happen again.
걱정해 주셔서 감사합니다.
It appears Jin-hyuk is in a meeting with the PR team when suddenly Secretary So-yoon plans to alter one of the plans regarding the orchestra ticket raffle already been widely used. Jin was once scolded by his colleague as he seemed unfocused. However, after thinking about it, Jin-hyuk actually had an idea for a masquerade party like those often held during Halloween events. Secretary Seo-yoon agreed to it, and Jin-hyuk was asked to make a proposal.
구체적인 간 만들어 수 있겠어요?
예, 준비하겠습니다.
While working overtime, director Choi met Jin-hyuk. The director also said that he would move Jin-hyuk to the Soko Hotel because of his scandal with So-yoon, which threatens So-yeon's position as president.
연말에도 여기 있을 거란 보장이 있을까?
Jin-hyuk, who was about to go home, met So-hyun during a live session. Mr. Nam decided to pretend to have a stomachache so he couldn't drive and asked Jin-hyuk to take So-hyun home. Because of that, Jin-hyuk and So-hyun ended up going home together.
호텔 연말 행사 서치 좀 했어요.
Upon arriving home, Jin-hyuk thought about his scandal with So-yoon. He was also afraid that his mother would find out about it because previously his mother was very proud that he could work at a company with considerable benefits. While Jin-hyuk was jogging, he remembered So-hyun and wanted to see her at the place where So-yoon is currently located. Let's see Jin-hyuk at his house. So-yoon was surprised as the distance between them was quite far, as Jin-hyuk approached her by running. The situation started to become awkward when So-yoon referred to him as lover. Jin-hyuk suggested the idea of taking a photo together as they never had before.
네, 아니 사진 한 장 없어서 여기까지 달렸다니까요.
In the evening, Jin-hyuk talked to his parents about his transfer to the branch. He reasoned that it was simply normal for new employees. The next day, the secretary and team were surprised by Jin-hyuk's transfer announcement. He was also upset because Jin-hyuk had been working overtime to work on the proposal. He who knows about it cannot remain silent. He borrowed the phone belonging to the secretary and contacted So-yoon, to whom Jin-hyuk would be transferred. The next day, they were surprised by So-yeon's sudden return from Shanghai.
와, 대박이다. 진짜 멋있다, 대표님.
So-yoon called director Choi to her office. She was angry because director Choi had fired Jin-hyuk while she was not around. It seems that director Choi is always hiding behind the name of the Taekyung group, which makes So-yoon wonder, who is that man really siding with, the Taekyung group or Dongwa Hotel?
이해가 안 가서요. 뭘 하신 겁니까?
The next day, when he was sure he crossed paths with Jin-hyuk, he admitted that it was he who had contacted So-yoon. However, Jin-hyuk wasn't angry because they had been friends for a long time. Jin-hyuk then went to So-yoon's room. Unexpectedly, he didn't want So-yoon to cancel his transfer because he considered it a privilege. He would still go through with the transfer and leave as originally planned.
누구의 불찰도 아닙니다. 전 괜찮아요.
So-yoon insisted to her mother to stop meeting with Mrs. Kim. Because no matter what, she will never reconcile with the Taekyung family, because it truly torments her life. Mrs. Kim is threatening about her father's upcoming election. However, So-yoon responds by saying that whether her father wins or loses, it is due to his own efforts from the past.
누구 때문도 누구 덕도 아니야.
So-yoon then invited Jin-hyuk to celebrate their farewell. The two of them went to a place that Jin-hyuk chose, namely the grassland, where there is a tower from which they can see a beautiful view. So then Jin-hyuk walked together and talked about Jin-hyuk's secrets, one of which was that he learned the meaning of love from a book. They also spent time drinking coffee at a cafe. Jin-hyuk then gave So-hyun one of his cameras.
책으로 배운 사랑 졸업한 기념으로.
She refused at first because it was something valuable that belonged to Jin-hyuk. However, Jin kept insisting, so So-yoon couldn't refuse. He then tried out the camera with Jin-hyuk as the model. When he was leaving, Jin-hyuk had a fever, so he stopped by So-yeon's house to have tea. So-yeon pouring a drink was suddenly hugged by Jin-hyuk. He then revealed that he indeed currently has many desires and hopes after meeting So-yoon.
욕심이 끝도 없어.
Unexpectedly, Mi-jin had joined an online matchmaking group. She looked happy because someone had sent her a message in the group. Turns out, It was Dae-chan, turns out. Dae-chan's phone was being used by Jin Hyuk's younger brother, Jin Hyung.
말 걸지 마세요.
On 4th floor, Mi-jin is having a facial. She looks happy because the man she was messaging the other day is now asking her to meet up. She didn't realize that the man in question was actually Dae-chan because the photo on Dae-chan's profile didn't clearly show his face. Meanwhile, elsewhere, specifically in a restaurant, Dae-chan was waiting for the woman he was going to meet through online dating. Dakin didn't expect that the woman who came was Mi-jin. Mi-jin looked disappointed because she had thought she was going on a blind date with the CEO. Dae-chan didn't deny it, since he considered himself the CEO of a sea snail soup business enterprise, as he was proud of his achievements. Mi-jin asked Dae-chan to keep meat secret from Jin Hyuk. Upon arriving at the shop, Dae-chan drinks with Hae-in and Jin Hyuk's sibling. Hae-in suggests they should attend the party at her hotel. They were excited to go because there was a raffle with a great prize.
이상하게 옛날부터 행운권 운빨 진짜 좋아.
Long story short, New Year's Day finally arrived. Mr. Nam observed the employees as they prepared for the masquerade party. However, there was one thing missing for him, Jin Hyuk missing. Mr. Nam then picked up Jin Hyuk at the Donghua Resort in Asoko area. He lied that the masquerade party was at risk, so Jin Hyuk had to take responsibility.
김 부장님 당장대로 난리를 빨랑 나와요.
Jin Hyuk was also permitted by the manager to join Mr. Nam. Jin Hyuk did not expect that at that time Mr. Nam had come all the way to pick her up not as an employee, but as her boss's lover.
우리 대표님 남자친구 모시러 온 거지.
The party kicked off with great excitement. So-yoon, alone, was suddenly pulled by a young man who took her towards the balcony. When the man removed his mask, So-yoon was literally shocked because the man was Jin Hyuk, whom she missed dearly. The two of them kissed, accompanied by party music, and hugged because they loved each other. Jin invites So-yoon to go to a restaurant as he couldn't eat all day due to being too busy. While they were chatting, Jin suggested the idea of going on a date until late at night. The two of them went to the movies and watched a film, feeling incredibly happy. Afterward, Jin, who has to work tomorrow, must go to the station so he doesn't miss the train. He also took the time to kiss So-yoon. He still wanted to be with her a little longer. Meanwhile, at the New Year's party, Daikon won a raffle to spend the night at Dongwoo Hotel. He planned to invite a woman he had danced with earlier, and it appeared he didn't indeed realize that the woman was Mi-jin. Mi-jin was very surprised when she found out that the man she had been getting close to was Daikon. When they were going home, Daikon and Jin Hyuk invited Mi-jin to their shop. Mi-jin, starting to be influenced by alcohol, lost control. She talked about the reason Jin Hyuk was transferred to Sogol. He was exiled. Jin Hyuk immediately called his older brother to confirm the news. However, at that time Jin Hyuk was with So-yoon, so he ignored the phone call from his sister. The next morning, Mi-jin woke up at Daitsan's restaurant. She looked angry and embarrassed because Daikon was supposed to book a hotel room for her. Daikon was also annoyed to hear that, since he had planned to use a room voucher he had received. Unfortunately, the rooms were fully booked last night. It turns out Daikon is still curious about what Mi-jin said last night. However, the girl asked Daikon to forget about it because what she said wasn't very important. Mi-jin was very surprised when she opened her phone and saw a news article about her boss going on a date last night. She immediately contacted Mr. Nam to inform him about it. However, Mr. Nam just responded casually. He said it was certainly very normal for young couples who are truly in love.
야, 젊은 사람들이 데이트 좀 한 게 뭐 이상하냐? 나는 이런 네가 더 이상하다.
Jin finally decided to call So-yoon. Dan So-yoon is a bit worried because now Jin-yuk's face is clearly visible, and even his private life is under scrutiny. In the afternoon, So-yoon was seen eating with her father. She said that this time she would fight back and not remain silent. Her father didn't seem to mind. He is worried about Jin-yuk's condition, who's not used to this.
나 때문에 힘들어지는 거 지켜보는 거 정말 못할 짓이지.
Jin-yuk contacted his younger sibling and asked about their parents' condition. He worried his father and mother heard the spreading news. However, Jin-yuk said that their parents didn't know anything. In fact, Jin-yuk's mother was very disturbed because all day long the neighbors were talking about her son. On the other hand, Woo-suk invites So-yoon to meet. He then tried to stop So-yoon from leaving just like that. Woo-suk said that he wanted the two of them to make amends and reconcile. And even now, Woo-suk still keeps his wedding ring on his finger. So-hyun refused and said that Jin-yuk is currently someone very valuable to her. Just like what Woo-suk once did and felt when he was having an affair with another woman.
사랑하는 사람이 생겼다고 했을 때
Unexpectedly, Mrs. So-yoon met Jin-yuk at Soko. He reminds Jin-yuk to be self-aware because a man like Jin-yuk doesn't deserve a president. Moreover, So-yoon will indeed also make amends with her ex-husband. The woman also reminded Jin-yuk that a big battle would begin if Jin-yuk ignored her advice. Jin-yuk, distracted by Mrs. So-yoon's words, starts to lose focus. Then, So-yoon was trying to contact him. Jin-yuk answered the call cheerfully as if nothing had happened. So-yoon asked if the two of them would consider continuing their relationship considering the situation. So-yoon could only cry. She is worried that it will endanger Jin-yuk because netizens are now starting to slander him. In the end, Jin and Yuk made an agreement not to communicate with each other for a while. So-yoon indeed agreed, even though she knew this would be very painful.
서로 별일 없으니 무소식이다.
1 month later, they still hadn't exchanged a single message. However, in everything they did, they constantly thought of each other. So-yoon intends to print the photographic works she has taken. He recalled it was possible at Mrs. Lee's house. Mrs. Lee's story about her romance with her late husband suddenly reminded So-yoon of Jin-yuk, slightly. So-yoon quickly hurried to the Soka area and desperately to find the man she loved dearly. And in fact, the guess was correct. Jin-yuk was alone at the beach. So-yoon was talking her condition before meeting Jin-hyuk. So-yoon returned to Seoul with Mr. On. Jin-yuk, who is about to take a break, makes a video call to So-yoon to ask if she has arrived in Seoul. She quickly tidies her hair and changes clothes because she doesn't want Jin-yuk to see her just wearing pajamas. Jin-yuk said both should get used to making video calls before going to sleep.
잠든 거 보이면 끊을게.
So Yoon, who is working, is receiving many bouquets, none other than from Woo-suk. And sure enough, Woo-suk asked her to meet up. So Yeon refused, saying she was busy.
나 미팅 많아. 기다리지 마. 그리고
The next day, Ji-nuk appeared in a magazine because the other day, he found a visitor's lost teddy bear in the folds of the bed sheets. Even though it was difficult, Jin-yuk still tried to find the doll, and it turned out that the mother of the little child was a news reporter at a magazine. This made the people at the office feel proud of Jin-yuk. The resort manager is also grateful for having employees who are not only handsome, but also attentive to the small things that visitors need. The board meeting was held because the stock dropped due to the actions of an employee who disrupted the hotel chain's plan to open a branch in Cuba. The owner suddenly canceled selling their land because of rumors that So-yoon would demolish the park to build a swimming pool. They talked about the Donghua hotel stock, which continues to decline. Director Choi swayed the board members, saying the hotel is now neglected because the CEO is too busy with their personal life. Jin Yuk, who heard the news from Ian about the park issue in Cuba, suddenly remembered an old man he once met there. He is known to have a garden that he refers to as belonging to his late wife, which he intends to preserve forever. Jin Yuk then took a leave and he was going to fly to Cuba right away. Upon arriving, Jin went to the hotel and met the owner of the park. However, an employee said that the owner no longer wished to see anyone.
Company, and it is hard for us to convince the landowner of the hotel.
Jin Yuk then decided to go to the place where he and his grandfather had once met, but his efforts seemed in vain. At that time, Jin Yuk waited reading a book save. Because it was already night, he decided to sleep at that place. Until the next day, Jin Yuk was awakened by the grandfather he was very eager to meet. Jin Yuk was very happy and handed over a letter he wrote in Spanish. To the old man, Jin wanted to resolve the misunderstanding with the news. So Yoon would never dismantle the garden. The old man then told him to stop waiting for him and said he would give an answer the next day.
I'll give you an answer tomorrow morning.
So Yoon, who is also going to fly to Cuba, is worried about Jin Hyuk's state as she cannot reach him. So Yoon went looking for Jin at the place where they first met, and they reunited there. The two of them went for a walk and drank beer until So Yoon got a call from the hotel. They mentioned the landowner named Two-Hand Samuel was willing to grant permission for the sale of the land, due to Jin Yuk's role in successfully convincing him. Jin Yuk hugged So Yoon, and they both kissed under the light of the Cuban moon. Both of them had fun in Cuba and returned afterward. In Korea, Jin Yuk had been reassigned to the headquarters team located in the center. So Yoon congratulated him Jin Hyuk joining public relations. Jin Yuk immediately sent a message to So Yoon and then asked her to meet at the storage warehouse. An employee had entered the place, prompting So Yoon to quickly pull Jin Yuk into hiding. Jin went out when the atmosphere seemed quiet, but he ended up meeting one of the employees, which made him run away immediately. Jin Yuk was locked in by his father drinking coffee in the cafe. His father revealed that he actually already knew about his son's case and So Yoon. The father said he was worried about Jin Hyuk because their worlds were different. Jin kept reassuring his father he had decided to keep moving forward and was confident everything would be all right. In the evening, Jin Hyuk and Soyeon went to the park near Jin Hyuk's house. The man suggested the idea of drinking. So Yoon agreed, and they both drank in the tent, but only So Yoon drank because Jin Yuk had to drive. While half-conscious, So Yoon expressed her feelings because she is currently very happy and afraid of losing Jin Yuk. Jin Hyuk takes So Yoon home, and Woo-suk is already waiting in front of So Yeon's house to give her a gift. The next morning, So Yeon woke up, and when she remembered what happened the night before, she felt embarrassed. The phone rang, and it turned out to be from Jin Yuk. He quickly answered the call, but all he heard was Jin Yuk's voice singing happily. The holiday week finally arrived, and So Yoon and Jin Hyuk went for a walk while taking pictures of the scenery there. So Yoon put his hand into Jin Yuk's jacket pocket, and an object fell out, which turned out to be a ring. When he went to buy a gift for his mother, Jin Yuk considered So Yoon and gave her the item. Both of them are now wearing the same ring. Jin Hyuk said that right now he feels his world is filled with So Yoon. They hugged each other happily while capturing the moment in a photo.
천천히 다 해줄 거야.
The next day, Jin Yuk's family came to the Donghua Hotel to celebrate his mother's birthday. As a result of Jin Yuk's appearance in a magazine, he received many coupons and a day off, one of which he used for that day. So Yoon met Jin's parents directly, and they then graciously offered her a drink and invited her to use all the facilities. Jin decided not to stay, so he contacted So-yoon and thanked her.
아버지 엄청 좋아하셨는데 맛 좋다고 혼자 거의 다 드셨어요.
Now, Jin-yuk's father and So-yoon are sitting. With equally tense expressions, he immediately stated his purpose for meeting So-yoon, which was none other than his doubts and concerns about So-yoon and his son. He didn't want this relationship to cause many problems. So-yoon said that though this is difficult, she is grateful if Jin-yuk's father is willing to support them.
진혁 씨가 왜 그렇게 마음이 깊은 사람인지.
The two of them met at the spicy chicken feet shop and ate. Jin-hyuk thought if he needed to stay over at So-yoon's house tonight, he wanted to help So-yoon sleep soundly without taking medication.
설레지 말고 빨리 자요 그냥.
It appears Mr. Nam met with the Res Kim sector and discussed the complex condition of So-yoon. The Res Kim sector was frustrated because So-yoon always keeps her problems to herself. Meanwhile, on the 4th floor, Director Choi received a message from Woo-suk stating that he was the scapegoat in the Hotel Garden case from some time ago. Director Choi immediately went to meet Woo-suk in his office. Woo-suk said that he wouldn't use the video he had to harm Director Choi. However, he asked her to choose between telling Mrs. Kim about it or he would give the video evidence to So-yoon.
그 영상에 대해선 최 이사님과 저만 아는 걸로 하고.
On the 4th floor, Director Choi informed Madam Kim about the case at the Dome, but she acted as if she knew nothing about it. He then went to see Woo-suk and asked what it was that his son truly wanted. Woo-suk plans to enter the Donghua Hotel Company and meet Director Choi to collect Jaeon samples and give them to him. Sure enough, the next day Woo-suk came to the office and introduced himself as the new vice president. According to him, his position as vice president would help the hotel grow even more. So-yoon then asked what the purpose of Woo-suk entering the hotel was. The president said he wants to protect So-yoon. According to him, they needed to meet often and discuss the hotel's progress.
동화 호텔의 건강한 미래를 이야기해보자고.
Afterward, Woo-suk greeted the PR team, glanced at Jin-yuk, and saw Jin-hyuk's steps, who recently resolved the issue in the Dome. Woo-suk's arrival at the office clearly made Sin-yuk feel uneasy. Mr. CA reported his investigation results to So-yoon about Mr. Kim's call list, who had escaped. After digging into the issue, they found one number that the man consistently contacted before he ran away. He then went to meet Mr. Cha at his office. The two of them talked about Woo-suk entering the hotel. Twan CA means that currently, indeed, Taekyeon plans to destroy So-yoon. He became anxious and would not let So-yoon get hurt again.
다시 잡아먹히게 둘 수 없지, 아버지도 있는.
At that time, So-yoon was about to sign a contract, but she seemed hesitant. So-yoon becomes frustrated and confused, unsure what to do in such a situation. Jin-yuk visited Mrs. Lee, who had injured her leg, bringing her food. He was a bit surprised because So-yoon was also there. Previously, So-yoon admitted that she was still at the office. So-yoon enjoys the food made by Jin-yuk's mother. She is a bit envious because Jin-yuk has a mother who can cook delicious food for him.
집에 들어오면 엄마가 밥 차려주는 거 되게 부러웠어요.
In the evening, Jin-yuk's father asked for kimchi to be made to welcome Mrs. Lee's arrival. His father said that he would also invite So-yoon to join and at the same time thank her for the drink offer yesterday. The next day, Jin-yuk sent a dinner invitation message to So-yoon. At the same time, Mikan also informed So-yoon that So-hari is the anniversary of Chairman Young's death, which is very important for So-yoon to attend. Hearing So-yoon was instantly thrown into confusion. Jin-yuk, who heard it, stayed silent. That night, while taking So-yoon home, Jin-yuk said that their dinner plans were cancelled because Mrs. Lee suddenly had something to attend to. However, the next day at the office, So-yoon accidentally overheard Mikan saying that Jin-yuk couldn't come to work because there was a guest coming to his house. The doorbell rang at Jin Yuk's house, and he thought it was Mrs. Lee. But when he opened the door, Jin Yuk was shocked to find So-yoon standing in front of him. Jin Yuk felt happy, and they both hugged each other. The Jin family was surprised seeing their son come in with So-yoon and introduce her as his girlfriend. So-yoon and Mrs. Lee had dinner, and they seemed happy with Jin Yuk's family. They eagerly ate the dish made by Jin's mom and indeed praised it for being so delicious. For So-yoon, their family is very friendly and so warm. After eating, So-yoon and Jin went on a date in a park. She didn't expect Jin Yuk would lie to her about the dinner that was supposed to be canceled.
식사 취소됐다고 한 거죠.
Nearby, journalists welcomed the arrival of So-yoon's car. They prepared the camera, and when the car door opened, it wasn't So-yoon who arrived, but Mi-jin. Suddenly, they were both confused and disappointed. Mi-jin apologized and said that President So-yoon couldn't come because he had another appointment. On the other hand, Mi-jin went to the Dakin shop because Jin Yuk contacted her to ask for help. It turns out the help referred to was indeed replacing him to assist Dakin in serving the customers. After the shop closed, the two of them drank while relaxing and unwinding. Mi-jin apologizes because the other day she was too harsh on Dakin. But Dakin teased her instead, which made Mi-jin feel embarrassed and leave the shop. The relationship between Dakin and Mi-jin has reached sweethearts. When Mi-jin accepted Dakin's love, the two were seen eating together. Meanwhile, Mrs. Sinyo was angry with her husband. After seeing the headlines about the end of Yeon's relationship with the chairman's family, So-yoon actually feels uneasy with her father. Considering that the election will be held soon, however, her father said that what So-yoon did was right. He wants So-yoon to live a happy life that no longer depends on the Taekyung family. The next day, So-yoon received news about who owned the phone that was frequently contacted by a man who once caused trouble at a hotel in Cuba. Jin Yuk suggests that So-yoon forgive the perpetrator because once she forgives, the burden in her heart will also disappear. Come on, Jin, at least everyone has made mistakes. So-yoon finally made a decision. He wants Mr. Lee to reveal who is behind this. Before the shareholders' meeting, So-yoon transferred Mr. Lee to the Cuba Hotel, hoping he understands the future of the Donghua Hotel. Mr. Lee was silent, full of emotion, and still couldn't believe what the president-director said. The next day, the meeting about the CEO's contract extension was opened. Director Choi was enthusiastic as he believed Woo-suk would receive most votes from meeting members. Before they started meeting, So-yeon asked for a moment because there was an issue that needed to be discussed. He brought Mr. Lee, and which surprised Director Choi. Mr. Lee, with a bit of nervousness, honestly said that he was just following Mr. Choi's orders to send an email that could cancel the hotel construction in Cuba. He admitted to doing it on the orders of someone who was none other than Director Choi. That confession made Director Choi break out in a cold sweat. So-yoon told Director Choi to simply apologize. Even in a state of panic, the man still seemed unwilling to admit his mistake. So-yoon was annoyed and chose to leave the room. She handed over this issue to President Woo-suk and board members to decide on the matter about Mr. Choi.
누구의 고용인인가요?
Woo-suk was also seen leaving the room. Director Choi couldn't say anything as Woo-suk was honest and didn't defend him. Once upon a time, Jin Yuk became an impromptu photographer because the actual photographer was on leave. In the evening, Jin Yuk went to So-yeon's house to give her a bouquet of flowers. So-yeon was surprised as the flowers were for the wedding photographer. Jin Yuk confirmed this. He admitted that during the photo shoot, he kept thinking that So-yoon would be much prettier than the model. Jin Yuk then expressed his feelings, saying that he couldn't live without So-yoon, so they had to stay together.
딱 이렇게.
Moving to another place, a neighbor approached Mrs. Jin-yuk to employ her child at Donghua Hotel. Mrs. Jin-yuk reasoned that her son couldn't help. Her neighbors also mentioned that Jin-yuk worked at the hotel because he had a relationship with the president, not through official channels. The cynical assumptions of the neighbors made Jin-yuk's mother feel uncomfortable. She sent a letter to So-yoon through Mi-jin inviting her to meet. The two of them met at a restaurant. Mrs. Jin-yuk apologizes and pleads with So-yoon to end her relationship. She wants Jin-yuk's life to be calm and happy like it used to be. So-yoon just hung her head dejectedly with tears streaming down her face as she listened to the confession and request from Jin-yuk's mother.
만난다고 다 결혼하는 거는 아니죠.
So-yoon looked gloomy after Jin-yuk's mother asked her to stay away from her son. Jin-yuk is currently happy because tonight he is meeting So-yoon's father. In that meeting, Mr. Sie asked Jin-yuk to take care of So-yoon, like placing great trust in him. So-yoon invited Mi-jin for a drink at a cafe. Mi-jin looked worried and then asked what was really going on with So-yoon. So-yoon kept denying it, although in the end, she couldn't hold back her tears. So-yoon mentioned that if her status as someone who was once married became known, everyone would recognize it. This is what bothers her, because Jin-yuk and his family would definitely receive a negative stigma.
모른 척하고 싶은데 자꾸 마음이 덜컥덜컥 내려앉아.
Mi-jin tries to convince So-yoon to maintain her relationship with Jin-yuk because this happiness So-yoon has never experienced before. On that day, Jin-yuk accompanied So-yoon to a village for personal matters. There, they looked at paintings while taking a walk. Jin-yuk saw that something was up with So-yoon as she didn't seem like her usual self. That night, Jin-yuk invited his mother to have dinner together at a restaurant. He asked what his opinion was about his relationship with So-yoon.
그냥 손님 아닌 거 알잖아.
Jin-yuk could sense that his mother didn't seem to support the relationship. The concern is felt by the staff from the public relations team as a conflict is about to happen. They are grateful because So-yoon no longer needs to worry about her father's reputation. She always considered her father who would participate in the election.
차 의원님 이미지 걱정 안 해도 되고.
When facing the Taekyeon group, Mr. Sie met So-yoon in his office, and he could see So-yoon's very worried face. So-yoon then asked the reason why her father was doing all this. Even though, in truth, she had worked so hard to reach the top position. The father said that he gained that courage thanks to So-yoon. Father told So-yoon to be more careful as the Taekyeon group become increasingly reckless. Meanwhile, Jin-yuk is taking So-yoon home because Mr. Nam is drinking with Tuenka. Jin-yuk tries to calm So-yoon and says she should be more enthusiastic because Mr. Sie and everyone will surely support her. To cheer up So-yoon, Jin-yuk takes her to Daecheon restaurant. Upon arriving there, they receive news that Jin-yuk has been jailed for fighting with his friends. So-yoon becomes increasingly sad because she knows the reason why Jin-yuk fought was none other than to defend his brother. It turned out that rumors were circulating that Jin-yuk was seducing a company president so their family could gain wealth. So-yoon can't stop thinking about this. But she also remembered Jin-yuk's hope of always being with her. That made her even more frustrated. So-yoon could only cry thinking about what she should do. Not wanting to make So-yoon anxious, Jin-yuk tells So-yoon his sibling is doing fine. One day, a woman who was Wosuk's mistress came to take So-yoon. The woman was known as Soa. Soa explained that she used to be Wosuk's pretend girlfriend. The two of them were even dating with a secret agreement.
다 연극이었다는 말씀. 비밀 유지 조건도 있었는데.
It turns out Wosuk only asked the girl to eat and watch together. For her, though it was initially an act, gradually she developed a hope. But it turned out that when she loved Wosuk, Wosuk himself really loved So-yoon more. Soa was really jealous and envious of So-yoon, but in the end, she became self-aware. So-yoon just remained silent while listening to the girl's confessions. After that meeting, So-yoon visited Woo-suk at his office, which surprised Woo-suk greatly because So-yoon had never done this before. So-yoon said that if he had met Soa and learned everything Woo-suk had done in the past, Woo-suk said that he did all this exclusively to free So-yoon from his mother's house, which had indeed caused much suffering in his life. So-yoon also expressed gratitude for Woo-suk's sacrifice. She admitted that Woo-suk had taught her many things, and thanks to him, she now knows how to let go. The next day, So-yoon invited Jin-hyuk to go for a walk, and she made Jin-hyuk feel very flustered. So-yoon didn't hesitate to hug Jin-hyuk. Jin-hyuk is very happy because So-yoon's mood is starting to improve. Jin was happy to spend a day dating with So-yoon. While eating at a restaurant, So-yoon was about to talk about something serious. Before he could speak, Jin-hyuk had already taken out a gift containing a camera case that he made himself. So-yoon is becoming more confused, wondering if her decision is right or wrong. Today, the public was shocked by Mr. CA's confession admitting that he had illegally received funds from a company during the election. That is why Mr. CA is willing to accept the lawsuit and all its consequences. People have also started to speculate about which company provided the illegal funds. The public relations team discussed this issue. Mincy thought that the company might be the Daejeon Group.
어떻게 되는 거야, 이러면?
태경에서 받았다던데.
Jin-hyuk looked sad when thinking about So-yoon, who is surely in trouble. He recalled Mr. CA's words who asked him to take good care of So-yoon. And maybe that's why Mr. CA said that. Previously, Mr. CA did ask his wife for help to solve this problem. It turns out Mr. CA asked Mrs. Jean to be a witness if they received illegal funds from the Daejeon Group. Mr. CA tries to convince his wife that they must reveal the truth so that So-yoon is no longer controlled by the Daejeon Group. Mrs. Kim looked confused when she saw Mr. CA publicly confessing. Earlier, he wanted to use that to threaten Mr. CA. However, apparently the man has turned into the police station. That night, Jin-hyuk saw So-yoon about to go home with such a sad face. Jin-hyuk then asked for the car keys because he was going to drive So-yoon home. The two of them ended up sitting in a restaurant. Jin smiles, trying to cheer up So-yoon. So-yoon is grateful because Jin-hyuk has been attentive to her. So-yoon said that if now the two of them have to part ways. Jin-hyuk was very surprised to hear So-yoon's words. Tears kept falling from his eyes, and his heart ached. However, Jin-hyuk understands this might be difficult for So-yoon.
여기까지가 애틋한 사랑도 있어요.
He pleaded with So-yoon to reconsider. So-yoon then chose to leave the restaurant, leaving Jin-hyuk still in disbelief about what was happening. So-yoon is watching the news on her father, who has made a statement saying the Taekyang company provided illegal funds. So-yoon also indeed thanked her father for having the courage to reveal all of this. At her office, Mrs. Kim talks to an attorney on the prosecutor who might be looking for evidence against the Taekyang Group.
압수수색 해봐야 나올 거 없습니다.
Jin's father seemed disappointed after finding out that his wife had met So-yoon. Mrs. Jin-hyuk said that she regrets telling So-yoon to end her relationship with the prince. She argued that she did it for the common good. For Jin-hyuk's father, his wife's decision was wrong because it could hurt both of their happiness. It turns out that Jin-hyuk overheard his parents' conversation from behind the door. He remained silent and eventually understood why So-yoon decided to break up with him.
나도 진혁 씨 많이 아껴요.
Jin went directly to meet So-yoon in her office. He hugged her and asked why So-yoon didn't inform him about her mother coming to see her. With tears in her eyes, Jin-hyuk pleaded for So-yoon to wait until at least her mother gave her blessing. So-yoon said she asked to break up not due to Jin-hyuk's mother, but because she could no longer bear Jin-hyuk and the important people in her life getting hurt. Jin-hyuk couldn't do anything. He was so sad the reality that So-yoon had now given up on them.
내가 못할 것 같아요.
Once, Uncle Woo-suk met So-yoon. The man said that Wosuk had acquired all the shares from Taekyung's shareholders, and Wosuk's intention was none other than to give those shares to So-yoon. The man then asked So-yoon to accept it so that she would have more shares, making it difficult for Taekyung to take over her hotel. So-yoon calmly said that she would not take the shares because she was not entitled to them. The next day, Jin-hyuk wrote a resignation letter from the public relations team. Jin-hyuk then left his office and went to meet So-yoon.
나 당신 이해해요.
Days later, Mrs. Jean was called by the prosecution. Outside the room, reporters were waiting for her and asking about the truth of the Taekyung Group case. Meanwhile, Mrs. Kim was calm watching Mrs. Jean head to the prosecutor's office. A few hours later, he got angry when he found out Mrs. Jean admitted receiving shares from the Taekyung Group. The next day, the officers came to pick up Mr. Sie, and Mrs. Jean was sad to see her husband being taken into custody. The man didn't have the chance to eat all of his food yet. Mr. Sie patted his wife's shoulder as if asking her to be strong. On the other hand, So-yoon asked Mrs. Jean to speed up the car because she wanted to meet her father. So-yoon received news that her father had already been arrested. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk was surprised to see his mother awaiting him in a cold atmosphere. Both of them went to a cafe. Jin-hyuk's mother intended to discuss her meeting with So-yoon, but Jin-hyuk already knew about it beforehand.
엄마랑 아빠랑 하는 말.
Jin-hyuk also said that he would not hate his mother just because of this issue. He expressed his determination and would wait until his mother gave her blessing for his relationship with So-yoon. So-yoon visits her father, who is now wearing prison clothes. That morning, So-yoon received a gift box from Jin-hyuk, which turned out to contain the shoes she had worn while in Cuba. So-yoon apologized for having once said a farewell sentence. Jin-hyuk was relieved and thankful because So-yoon now had the courage to say it. Their relationship returned to how it was before. There was no longer any sadness or melancholy on So-yoon's face. There was only smiles and laughter, like in Jin-hyuk's Cuba photo. So-yoon is definitely planning to invite Jin-hyuk for a holiday to Santiago. Jin-hyuk agrees, but now he wants to go there together as a newlywed couple.